Everything you think you know about Pokémon is a lie. The friendly anime, the wholesome games, the cheerful adventures you grew up with, none of that was supposed to be the real story, and I can prove it. There's a version of Pokémon that most fans have never seen. A version where Pokémon don't just faint in battles, they die. Violently. A version where Team Rocket isn't bumbling comic relief, but an actual murder syndicate. A version where being a 10-year-old trainer means risking your life every single day. And here's the thing that's gonna blow your mind. This darker version isn't some edgy fan fiction. It's actually closer to what the creator of Pokémon originally intended. But before I reveal exactly how dark the original Pokémon story was supposed to be, I need to tell you about 3 specific moments that were completely censored from the version you know. The first one involves an Arbok getting sliced in half. The second shows a Magmar literally burning a Pokémon alive. And the third one reveals something about Ash's equivalent character that changes everything you thought you understood about Pokémon trainers. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're gonna see Pikachu in a completely different light. Let me start by asking you a question. When you think of the original Pokémon story, what comes to mind? For most people, it's the anime. Ash Ketchum, Pikachu, Team Rocket blasting off again. Pokémon fainting when they lose battles. That bright, colorful Saturday morning cartoon that defined childhoods for an entire generation. But here's what almost nobody realizes. That anime version came second. Before the anime existed, before most of the world even knew what Pokémon was, there was a manga. And this manga, called Pokémon Adventures or Pokémon Special, depending on your region, was published right alongside the original games. Now here's where it gets interesting. Satoshi Tajiri, the actual creator of Pokémon, has said that this manga, not the anime, reflects the world of Pokémon as he originally imagined it. Think about that for a second. The guy who invented Pokémon said the darker, more violent manga is closer to his vision than the friendly cartoon we all grew up with. But I'm getting ahead of myself because I promised you 3 censored moments and I haven't told you about any of them yet. Don't worry, we're getting there. But first you need to understand just how different these 2 versions of Pokemon actually are, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. In the anime, what happens when your Pokemon loses a battle? It faints. It gets tired, it falls over, you take it to a Pokemon Center, Nurse Joy heals it up, and everything's fine. It's treated like a sport, like your Pokemon just ran a really hard race and needs to rest. In the manga, Pokemon die. Frequently, brutally, and permanently. Remember that first censored moment I mentioned, the Arbok getting sliced in half? That actually happens in the manga. During a battle, a Charmeleon uses its claws and literally cuts an Arbok completely in 2. We're not talking about a fade to black moment where you can pretend it survived. The manga shows you the severed body, it shows you the aftermath. This Arbok is dead and everyone in the story knows it. But here's what's even more disturbing. This isn't treated as some shocking traumatic event. It's just what happens in Pokemon battles sometimes. The characters react with determination or anger, but not with horror. Because in this version of Pokemon, death in battle is an accepted risk. It's part of being a trainer. Now, I can already hear some of you saying, okay, but that's just one example. Maybe it was a one-time thing for shock value. Oh, you sweet summer child. That Arbok scene isn't even in the top 5 most disturbing deaths in the manga. Not even close. Let me tell you about the second censored moment. And I'm warning you right now, this one is worse. There's a scene where a Magmar is ordered to use Fire Blast on a wild Pokemon. In the anime, Fire Blast is just this cool looking fire attack that does damage but leaves the opponent mostly fine, maybe a little singed. In the manga, this Pokemon gets cooked alive. I'm talking about detailed artwork showing a creature being consumed by flames, burning to death while other characters watch. And the trainer who ordered this attack, they're not portrayed as a villain. They're just a regular trainer doing what trainers do in this world, using their Pokemon's full power to eliminate threats. This is the Pokemon world that Satoshi Tajiri envisioned. Not a friendly competition between trainers, but a dangerous world where Pokemon are powerful, deadly creatures, and training them means accepting that violence and death are part of the equation. But you're still waiting for that third censored moment, aren't you? The one I said changes everything about trainers? We're getting there. But first, I need to tell you about Team Rocket, because this is where the differences between the manga and anime become absolutely stark. In the anime, Team Rocket is Jessie, James, and Meowth. They're bumbling villains who show up, try to steal Pikachu, fail spectacularly, and blast off into the sky. They're comic relief. They're so incompetent that you almost feel bad for them. Kids watching the anime aren't scared of Team Rocket. They're entertained by them. In the manga, Team Rocket is a crime syndicate involved in theft, murder, genetic experimentation, and terrorism. They're not trying to steal Pikachu for Giovanni's collection. They're running illegal Pokémon fighting rings, conducting brutal experiments on Pokémon to create biological weapons, and murdering anyone who gets in their way. Ulti Surge, that friendly electric-type gym leader from the games and anime. In the manga, he's a high-ranking Team Rocket operative who uses his Pokémon to torture and kill. Sabrina, the psychic-type gym leader. She's working with Team Rocket to develop Pokémon that can mind control entire populations. These aren't redemption arc villains who eventually see the error of their ways. These are legitimate threats who represent the absolute worst of what humans can do when they have power over powerful creatures. And the manga makes it clear that Team Rocket isn't some isolated group of bad guys. They're a symptom of a much darker world where Pokémon are seen as weapons and tools rather than partners. Now here's where I need to connect all of this back to that third censored moment I promised you. Because everything I've told you so far, the violent deaths, the brutal Team Rocket, the dangerous world of Pokémon training, all of that builds to reveal something fundamental about what it actually means to be a trainer in the original vision of Pokémon. The main character of Pokémon Adventures is named Red. He's basically the manga version of Ash, except he's nothing like Ash. Where Ash is optimistic and friendly and always believes in the power of friendship, Red is calculating, strategic, and willing to do whatever it takes to win. And here's that third moment. There's a scene where Red's Pokémon are badly injured in a battle. Not fainted, injured. Bleeding, broken bones. Genuine trauma. And Red has a choice to make. He can rush them to a Pokémon Center and hope they survive. Or he can keep them in battle, because retreating means losing, and losing in this situation means he dies along with them. So what does Red do? He keeps them fighting. He orders his severely injured Pokémon to continue battling, knowing that every attack they take might be the one that kills them, because that's what it takes to survive as a trainer in this world. The manga shows you Red's face during this decision. There's no cheerful determination, no friendship speech, no belief that everything will work out because they believe in each other. There's just cold calculation and the acceptance that sometimes being a trainer means sacrificing your Pokémon to save yourself. This is the version of Pokémon that Satoshi Tajiri said reflects his original vision. Not Ash promising Pikachu they'll always be friends. Red accepting that his Pokémon might die protecting him, and being willing to let that happen. Now you might be wondering if this is what the creator intended, why did the anime go in such a different direction? Why did Nintendo and Game Freak deliberately soften the tone so dramatically? The answer is actually pretty simple, and it reveals a lot about how global entertainment franchises get built. When Pokémon was being prepared for international release, Nintendo made a calculated business decision. They looked at this dark, violent manga that accurately reflected Tajiri's vision, and they said this will never work on American Saturday morning television. And they were right. In 1997, American networks were incredibly strict about what could be shown in children's programming. Violence, death, blood, anything that might upset parents or trigger complaints to the FCC, all of that had to go. So when the anime was being developed, the decision was made to completely reshape the Pokémon world into something that could air anywhere in the world without controversy. Battles became sports competitions, death became fainting, Team Rocket became comic relief. The entire tone shifted from dangerous adventure to wholesome journey, and because the anime was so successful and reached so many more people than the manga ever did, this softened version became what most people think of as real Pokémon. But here's the thing that really gets me, this decision to soften Pokémon wasn't just about making it suitable for kids' TV, it fundamentally changed what Pokémon means as a concept. In the original vision, Pokémon were dangerous, training them was risky. The relationship between trainer and Pokémon was complex, Mayans. Yes, there could be bonds and friendship, but there was also the reality that trainers were sending creatures into battle where they might get killed. It was dark, but it was also more honest about what Pokémon training actually represents. The anime stripped away all of that complexity. It turned Pokémon into a simple story about friendship and determination where nothing truly bad ever happens and every problem can be solved with a heartfelt speech and a powered-up attack. It's comforting, it's wholesome, but it's also fundamentally dishonest about what it means to capture wild creatures and force them to fight for you. And this is why the manga still matters, even though most Pokémon fans have never read it. Because the manga preserves that original vision, the one where being a Pokémon trainer isn't just an adventure, it's a dangerous lifestyle choice with real consequences. Let me give you one more example that perfectly illustrates the difference between these two versions. In the anime, legendary Pokémon are treated like rare collectibles. Ash encounters them, there's usually some kind of misunderstanding or threat that gets resolved, and then the legendary Pokémon goes back to doing whatever legendary Pokémon do. They're powerful, sure, but they're not really dangerous. In the manga, legendary Pokémon are depicted as forces of nature. They're not creatures you can befriend through the power of your pure heart. They're apocalyptic threats that can destroy cities, manipulate reality, and kill anyone who gets too close. When Red encounters legendary Pokémon in the manga, it's not a heartwarming moment of connection. It's a life-threatening situation where he has to use every ounce of skill and strategy just to survive. There's a storyline in the manga where Team Rocket is trying to capture and weaponize the legendary birds Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres. In the anime version of a similar story, this is treated as a threat because these Pokemon shouldn't be captured, they should be free. In the manga, it's treated as an existential threat to humanity because if Team Rocket succeeds in controlling these creatures, they'll have the power to commit genocide on a global scale. That's the difference. The anime treats legendary Pokemon like rare animals that should be protected. The manga treats them like nuclear weapons that could end civilization if they fall into the wrong hands. Now, I want to address something that some of you might be thinking, okay, so the manga is darker and more violent, but does that really make it better? Maybe the anime version is more appropriate and that's not a bad thing. And look, that's a fair point. I'm not here to argue that children should be exposed to graphic violence or that the darker version is objectively superior. What I'm interested in is how the decision to soften Pokemon has shaped the entire franchise and what we've lost in that translation. Because here's what the anime version can't really explore: the ethical questions at the heart of Pokemon. Is it right to capture wild creatures and make them fight for you? What does it mean when trainers send their Pokemon into battles where they might get seriously hurt? How do you reconcile the idea of Pokemon as friends with the reality of Pokemon as tools for combat? The manga doesn't shy away from these questions. It shows you trainers struggling with the morality of what they're doing. It shows you Pokemon who are traumatized by battle, trainers who abuse their power, and in the real consequences of a world where children are given control over powerful creatures. The anime, by contrast, has to pretend these questions don't exist. It has to maintain this fiction where everyone's happy, Pokemon love battling, and there's no ethical complexity to any of it. And that's fine for a kid's show, but it also means that Pokemon can never really grow up alongside its audience. Think about how many people who started watching Pokemon as kids are now adults in their 20s, 30s, or even 40s. These aren't children anymore, they're people who could handle more complex, mature storytelling. But the anime has stayed locked in that same wholesome, simple formula because that's the version of Pokemon that became successful. Meanwhile, the manga has continued to evolve and mature. Recent chapters of Pokemon Adventures deal with themes of political corruption, environmental destruction, and the cyclical nature of violence. The characters age, they deal with trauma, they make morally complicated choices. It's the version of Pokemon that grew up alongside its audience. And here's the really interesting part: Game Freak knows this. They know that there's an audience for more mature Pokemon content. That's why the games themselves have slowly been incorporating darker themes. The storyline in Black and White about whether Pokemon training is ethical, the apocalyptic threat in X and Y, the complex family dynamics and abuse themes in Sun and Moon. The games are slowly creeping back toward that original vision that Satoshi Tajiri laid out in the manga. They're testing how much darkness and complexity modern audiences are willing to accept in their Pokemon content. And the success of these darker storylines suggests that maybe, just maybe, there's room for Pokemon to finally embrace the full scope of what it was originally meant to be. So where does this leave us? We've got an anime that defined Pokemon for most of the world but fundamentally changed what it means. We've got a manga that preserves the original vision but that most fans have never read. We've got games that are caught somewhere in between, trying to serve both audiences. And we've got millions of fans who grew up with the wholesome version and have no idea that there's this entire other interpretation of Pokemon that's darker, more complex, and according to the creator himself, more accurate to his original vision. I think the real question isn't whether the manga or anime version is better. The question is, what would Pokemon look like today if the darker version had been the one that went global? What if the anime had stayed true to Tajiri's original vision? What if generations of kids had grown up with a version of Pokemon that didn't shy away from death, violence, and ethical complexity? We'll never know, because that's not the timeline we got. But I'll tell you this, going back and reading Pokemon Adventures after growing up with the anime is one of the most disorienting experiences you can have as a Pokemon fan. It's like discovering that everything you thought you knew about this world was carefully curated to hide the darker reality underneath, and maybe that's okay. Maybe having both versions, the wholesome anime and the darker manga, means that Pokemon can serve different purposes for different people. Maybe the 8-year-old watching Pokemon on TV needs that simple, safe version. And maybe the 28-year-old who grew up with Pokemon needs to know that there's a more mature version waiting for them if they want to dig deeper. What I do know is this: the next time you watch an episode of the Pokemon anime and see Ash's Pikachu knock out an opponent with Thunderbolt, you're going to think about what that same attack looks like in the manga. You're going to remember that in the original vision, that Pokemon might not get back up, and Pikachu might not just be a cute electric mouse. It might be a weapon capable of killing. So here's my question for you. Would you want to see a Pokemon anime that stays true to the manga's darker tone? Or do you think the wholesome version we got is exactly what Pokemon should be? Drop a comment and let me know, because I'm genuinely curious whether fans are ready for Pokemon to finally embrace its original vision, or whether some things should stay softened for the sake of the kids who are discovering this world for the first time. We'll stick around for the best Pokemon channel that exists, I guess. I mean, probably anyways.